In this brief documentary, Sitlali and I have researched the causes, courses, and consequences of nationalist and independence movements in South Africa, focusing on the evolution of Black activism from the early 20th century to the present. A basic theme that emerges from this exposition is the continuing reluctance of Blacks to adopt a long-term strategy of violent confrontation with whites, despite violent white responses to Black activism. We are focusing specifically on the movement of 1952 and the Sharpeville Massacre of 1960. Enjoy!
Every month, Esme Mayseals tends to the grave of the father she never knew, born just 2 months after his death. It's her way to honor him for losing his life at a protest against apartheid.
White South African is a term which refers to the people from South Africa who are of European descent. So basically, at this time, there were two different groups, the white supremacists and the native South Africans. White South Africans are by far the largest European-descended population group in Africa. The two major races created two divided groups, which led to apartheid in 1948.
To this small country store marks the beginning of the location in the town of Nelspruit, the African location where natives are forced to live. Nelspruit, a small mining town in the northern Transvaal, has for the past week been the focus of the racial tension in South Africa.
Apartheid was a political and social system in South Africa while it was under white minority rule. This was in use in the 20th century, from 1948 to 1994. Racial segregation had been used for centuries, but the new policy that started in 1948 was stricter and more systematic. The people of South Africa were divided by their race, and the races were forced to live apart from each other. There were laws that kept up the racial separation. In 1952, the African National Congress, a Black civil rights group, begins a campaign for defiance of unjust laws as a protest against apartheid. Nelson Mandela is one of its leaders. The Defiance Campaign in 1952 was the first large-scale, multiracial political mobilization against apartheid laws under a common leadership by the African National Congress, South African Indian Congress, and the Colored People's Congress. More than 8,000 trained volunteers went to jail for defying unjust laws in order to combat apartheid. More specifically, the campaign used large-scale national non-cooperation to target laws enacted by the South African government that the ANC deemed unjust. The campaign began on June 26, 1952, as groups throughout South Africa executed various acts of defiance in main cities. The ANC and the South African Indian Congress, the SAIC, united Africans and Indians alike to take on apartheid. So basically, everyone was committing crimes to get arrested on purpose. None of the crimes were violent by any means, but they were just things to tick off the white minority.
Major arrests on June 23rd included those of the SAIC leader Yusuf Chechila and ANC leaders Walter Sisulu, Nelson Mandela, and Raymond Malaba. A major tactic employed by these resistors was choosing to be imprisoned rather than paying a fine after arrests. This allowed demonstrators to burden the government economically while giving them a theater to voice their opinions on apartheid when they were tried in court.
Arrived in South Africa at the very young age of 1950. I didn't expect anything. I didn't really know very much about the society in the country, except that it was a hot place and there were lions running around somewhere. However, what shocked me and surprised me was the invisible wall that existed in South Africa between two major societies. This barrier was extreme. There was no social contact, there was no political contact, and there was no cultural contact between the two societies.
Okay, now we're going to talk about the massacre in Sharpeville, where 67 Africans are killed while protesting apartheid. It started out as another non-violent campaign. Between 5,000 and 7,000 people had gathered at Sharpeville Police Station to protest against the past laws, which they claim are designed by an apartheid government to seriously restrict their movement in white areas. The laws, which all require black men and women to carry around reference books containing their personal details, including name, tax code, and employer details, have this year been extended to all black women as well as men. The law states that anyone found in a public place without their book will be arrested and detained for up to 30 days. The aim was for all black Africans to leave their passbooks at home and present themselves at police station for arrest, much like the protest of 1952. This would cause prisons to become overcrowded, labor to dry up, and the economy to grind to a halt. But 3 hours after it began, the peaceful gathering had turned into a bloodbath, killing 6 peaceful South African protesters.